सभी को नमस्कार। आज का हमारा ये हेरिटेज साइट्स, ये हमारा चौथा दिन है। मैं इस फोर्थ डे आप सभी का स्वागत करता हूँ और मैं सिंधु जी को रिक्वेस्ट करता हूँ कि कृपया आज के हमारी सेशन की शुरुआत करें।
Namaskar, namaskar to all. I shall straight away start my presentation. I hope you're all able to see it.
Yes, it's okay.
Yeah. Today's session will be on World Heritage Sites. Of course, I will not be looking at World Heritages and discussing about them, but rather three important, parts of this World Heritage Sites. That is how these international organizations came into existence, and then what is the process of getting enlisted as World Heritage Site, and also two case studies, important case studies, where these World Heritage Site organization play a huge role. So let's just take a quick recap on session 3, where we discussed authenticity and integrity. This is something that is important for us today also while we are discussing. We also discussed about aims of a conservation, especially the three important tasks that we need to do about physical condition assessment and management, context assessment and things like that. And then conservation ethics. And we discussed these aspects with two case studies, important ones, Sun Temple Konark and Shinto Shrines. So with that, we will move on for today's session. Now, as I told, these international organizations in conservation play a huge role. How did they came into existence? There was an immense process of reconstruction which was followed after World War II. Now, architects and building conservators confronted the task like which needed them to collaborate between various expertise. Until then, it was relatively few people who had concerned themselves over historic buildings and that they needed to use or reuse, recreate and restore most of the cultural heritage which they seem to have lost because of the wars, and this became particularly very, very important. Now, the problems were frequently identical at every part of the world. They needed interchange of experiences and technical help across different national borders. They needed support from other people other than their country to build conservation, and that was very urgent at that time. So this kind of led to landmark convention in the history of conservation, that is Venice Charter, which was formed in 1964. Now, this also led to a consequent founding of ICOMOS, which is a non-government organization in 1965. This was in Warsaw because of the Venice Charter. This came into existence, as a supporter or advisory role. Actually, in ICOMOS means International Council of Monuments and Sites. This is an international forum for conservation, protection, rehabilitation, and enhancement of monuments, group of buildings and sites. Now, prior to this, there were two more international conferences which were hosted, one by Rome on the study of scientific methods for examining and preservation of works of arts in 1930. This was followed by Greeks who hosted the first International Congress of Architects and Technicians of Historic Monuments. This culminated into another important charter, Athens Charter in 1931. Now, ICOMOS actually acts as an advisory body to UNESCO, particularly to monitor the World Heritage Sites, and UNESCO was formed in 1945. This is an intergovernmental agency, United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization. Now we'll look at some more international organizations which kind of play a key role in conservation. ICROM, International Center for the Study of Preservation and Restoration of Cultural Property. This is also intergovernmental organization. This was formed in 1956. This kind of involves data gathering, analysis, research, field projects, advocacy, education, all of this. Then you have
सिंधु जी आपकी आवाज ब्रेक हो रही है.
Post of both government
Very
and
sorry.
civil organization.
Very sorry
This
to
was formed
interrupt,
in
but your voice is breaking.
No problem, no problem. Am I audible now, sir?
Yes,
I
now
think
now it's okay. Now it's okay.
internet is
Now it's
slightly
okay.
weak. Okay.
Now it is okay.
So IUCN is also a very important international organization. Yeah. Thank you. So the next one is International Council of Museum. Now this is also like ICOMOS. It's a non-governmental organization. This was formed in 1946, where they look after the museum and everything related to museum. Then we have something called as COE, Council of Europe. This is an international organization. Again, they kind of cooperate with other institutions in conserving heritage properties. So now let's move on to something more important. What these international organizations play as a role in conservation. They have certain duties, certain activities. The World Heritage Convention is one of the most important global conservation instruments to say. This was created in 1972. The primary mission of convention is to identify and protect the world's natural and cultural heritage considered to be of outstanding universal value. We will discuss about outstanding universal value as we move forward. So UNESCO have these three important, activities: conventions, recommendations, and declarations. Now, when it comes to convention, like I said, the most important convention that we can associate at the moment is with the World Heritage Convention. And then, as far as recommendation goes, the historic urban landscape recommendation is one of the important one. This became an additional tool to integrate policies and practices of conservation of all this built environment into the wider goal of urban development in respect of inherited values and traditions of different cultures and context. So declarations are policy documents. They kind of integrate policies of sustainable development and bring out perspective into process of World Heritage Convention by identifying, protecting, conserving, presenting, and transmitting all the present to the future generation. So whatever is irreplaceable culture and natural heritage, that kind of becomes significant for sustainable development. And their role here, through declarations, they try to give out sustainable development strategies. And like UNESCO, we also have ICROM, which has charters, and ICOMOS also has charters. So these charters, that has to be ICOMOS. I think I've put the wrong logo. Please correct it. I'm talking about ICOMOS. So the first charter in 1972, this was a resolution of symposium on the introduction of contemporary architecture into ancient groups of buildings. Here, this was signed in Budapest, and this was largely to, harmonize ancient built fabric with the new architectural fabric that is developed. So they kind of give guidelines to accommodate the newer buildings with the ancient buildings in the vicinity. So this charter was largely spoke about it, guidelines and rules and how to do that particular thing. And in 1975, another a resolution of International Symposium on conservation of smaller historical town. This again, largely advocated heritage-led urban regeneration initiatives. And then in 1981 and 99, two of the Bara charters, which again, from Australia. Here, this charter specifically spoke about places with high level of significance where, proposed to be conserved or changed in some way, such as when restoring a house, museum, or changing the use of historic public building. They kind of defined core heritage testimonials, then justifies conservation planning and originality of the heritage. So they gave a broad prescription on these kind of interventions. And in 1987, we have this Washington Charter. This charter for conservation of historic towns and urban areas. They spoke largely about how the historic centers or quarters, together with their natural and man-made environments, could be protected or conserved. And beyond their role as historical documents, these areas embody a lot of values of traditional urban culture. So how to protect them? So that was given by Washington Charter. And the next important charter, I have only mentioned few charters, important charters here. There are several. I have highlighted those from ICOMOS actually. UNESCO also proposed several charters. So 1994, we have NARA document of authenticity. We did have an elaborate discussion on authenticity yesterday. NARA document came in effect in 1994 after all that when they looked at Asian context. So this sort of emphasizes authenticity in conservation by recognizing cultural diversity. Up until then, they were largely looking at European heritage sites, and the focus was there. So this kind of shifted the focus on Asian cultural heritage sites as well. So in 1995, we have Charter for Cultural Tourism. So development of tourism towards managing of resources for their viability. How a World Heritage, site which gets a lot of footfall, world tourism kind of a thing, how to protect them with this footfalls. Though some kind of guidelines, how to maintain the standards and things like that were discussed in these charters. So let's now look at a couple of important definitions, aims, and objectives of these organizations. Objective of conservation of ICOMOS is largely to enhance or is to prolong the life of cultural heritage, and if possible, to clarify the artistic and historical messages therein without the loss of authenticity and meaning. So this is the primary objective of ICOMOS, and they came up with guidelines. Some of them are to recognize heritage resource within its context. So it is not just about one heritage monument as such, but the context in which it exists. So that has to be considered or taken care of. And then undertaking a survey and documentation of these monuments and heritage site. Then archaeological and architectural research with existing and new data that they do on the site, and understanding and applying international doctrines. So we did discuss the doctrines in the last slide. So these are some of the guidelines which was expressed by ICOMOS. And UNESCO defines heritage as our legacy from the past, what we live with today, and what we pass on to future generations. Now, over the passage of time, original heritage may be partly or fully damaged, destroyed, or lost, considering the risk of losing an irreplaceable resources from deterioration, damage, and disappearances. This kind of led to the next important convention. So, on 16th November 1972, 17th General Conference of UNESCO adopted convention concerning the protection of the world cultural and natural heritage. So now this convention marks a landmark in the history of heritage conservation, I can say. This is the beginning of World Heritage sites. What is the mission of World Heritage Site? The specific criteria and conditions, they were all defined by World Heritage Convention that happened. They published a lot of criteria and conditions where one could enroll as World Heritage Site. So all of these specific criteria and conditions defined by the operational guidelines of convention, they are used to identify properties for inclusion on the World Heritage Site. The convention recognizes the way in which people interact with nature and fundamental need to preserve the balance between the two. So, some of the aims that they had: countries to sign the World Heritage Site. The World Heritage Convention, this kind of developed principal international mechanism where they called all the other countries to come and sign those heritages, which are not just for nation but heritage of the world. Heritage signifies not the nation but also the world, as in the heritage significance is of such high order that it goes beyond national, regional, local boundaries, and then it becomes globally significant property. So if a nation agrees that they have enough heritage that can offer or that can be considered as wealth of the world, global wealth, then those countries had to sign this convention. So they started with that, and then once the countries or states which sign in the WHC, then the other things were followed. Like they encourage state parties to nominate sites within the national territories, and then encouraged state parties to establish management plans and set up reporting system. Every state that had nominated the World Heritage Site, they had to give reporting in terms of how they are managing and planning to preserve and conserve the heritage site. So that was the procedure that they had to follow. So it is not like once you get enlisted in WHC and then you relax. There is a lot of continuous monitoring or management that goes on behind. So these systems were all to be set up by the state or the country which proposes or nominates their heritage for the World Heritage Site. And state parties safeguards World Heritage Site by providing technical assistance and professional training. So this is one of the important mission of UNESCO, where they provide these kind of help to all those who are enlisted as World Heritage sites under them. And they also support state parties' public awareness, local participation, to preserve their own culture and natural heritage. So they also encourage international cooperation in conserving World Heritage sites. I think this was the question asked in the previous session, that can other nations come and help the heritage site of ours. I think that is one of the most advantage factor, that once you're listed under World Heritage Site, then we have more power to seek help from UNESCO and other countries, through UNESCO from the other countries actually. So to concise, uh, the World Heritage Convention came up with these 5 C's as their strategies and objectives: credibility, conservation, capacity building, communication, and communities. So these were the 5 things that they sort of focused on. Now let's quickly look at categories of heritage properties. Cultural properties, natural, and mixed. These are the 3 broad categories that they uh, made. But before moving on and discussing each of these heritage properties, let's just try to understand what whenever they say outstanding universal value, what do they mean? Cultural and natural significance, which is so exceptional as to transcend national boundaries and to be of common importance for present and future generations of all humanity. This, if any heritage property in your nation has this kind of outstanding universal value, then that becomes credible, for World Heritage nomination. So let's quickly look at what do they mean when they say cultural heritage property. So all monuments, architectural works, works of monumental sculpture and paintings, elements of sculptural remains, archaeological in nature if they are, and all those inscriptions, even cave dwellings, and combination of any of these, features, which are of outstanding value. Now, this is very, very important. It has to be of outstanding universal value. This could be from point of view of, say, history or art or science. So works of man or combined works of man and nature, which has universal value in terms of aesthetics or ethnological values or anthropological values, largely man-made, and they all come under cultural heritage or cultural property. Now, here is an example for you. Machu Picchu. This is a lost civilization of Inca, and which is in the high Andes Mountains in Peru. This was built in 15th century, and this was later abandoned. It's renowned for its sophisticated dry stone. You see on the right side photograph, very sophisticated dry stone walls that you could see that fuse huge rocks. They are man-made, but they are in such harmony with the existing landform. That's the beauty. Without using mortar, they have constructed this. And all these buildings, they also play an astronomical alignments. So very, very beautiful, aesthetic and scientific marvel, one can say. So this is identified as one of the cultural properties. So moving ahead, cultural properties, as they revise, see, all these doctrines and the charters, they keep getting revised so as to include more and more cultural heritage of the world. So as they improved, cultural heritage also could accommodate more and more, different natured, for example, historic towns and cities, historic canals, cultural landscape, where manifest of tangible expression of significant interactions between the man and nature was achieved, then such cultural landscapes could also be listed under cultural heritage. Cultural roots, which included religious and trade. So they keep revising with different conventions and charters, and thereby we could incorporate more. The recent one, because of this inclusion of historic towns and cities, in 2017, Ahmedabad, old part of Ahmedabad, the historic city of Ahmedabad, the Pole Ahmedabad, that got enlisted as a World Heritage site. And also for cultural landscape, you have the rice terraces of the Philippine Cordilleras. Now here you can see the rice terrace, so beautiful. It is all man-made, but it is uh, made in such a way that it sits in harmony with the existing nature as well, as though it is looking a part of landscape itself. So all of these come under cultural heritage. And under natural heritage, this is an example of Sundarban, West Bengal, from India. Again, the natural features, which consists of physical or biological formations or groups of such formations, which are again of outstanding universal value, from aesthetic or geological or physiographical, or you can even have threatened species of animals and also plants, which are all of universal value. Then all includes natural sites. All these in view of science, even natural beauty, all of that come under natural heritage. Sundarban actually is more than 10,000 kilometers, land and water. We have both, and it has a significantly large area of mangrove forests. Beautiful, and most of it lie in India, and part of it lies also in Bangladesh. So a few rare and endangered species live in this park, including tigers, as you see in the picture, aquatic animals, birds, reptiles. Some of them are really endangered. So all of them are here in Sundarban. And the next one is mixed heritage. Mixed heritage, we have one nomination. India has one nomination. That means it has nominations for all, under all categories, cultural, natural, and mixed also. So what is mixed? It is a combination of both natural and cultural. Both part of outstanding universal value, whether it is man-made or the natural part of it, both has to be of outstanding universal value. Then they fall under mixed heritage. This is an example of Kanchenjunga National Park, Sikkim. This is listed under mixed heritage from India. Now comes the most important point. To enlist World Heritage sites, they have certain pillars to decide the outstanding universal value. What is it that decides the outstanding universal value? Then there are three pillars. The first pillar is to meet one or more criterias. They have 10 criterias. So your World Heritage site, or the site that you're trying to nominate under this, should have at least one criteria. It should satisfy one of the 10 criterias. It can also have more than one criterias. There is no limit for that. And the second one is that it should meet the condition of authenticity and integrity. Of course, we have discussed this extensively as to what is authenticity and integrity. So that is again one of the pillars. And the third pillar is to meet the requirements of protection and management. That any site that you nominate should have the ability and support of the government enough to protect and manage the site up to the standards of World Heritage. Standards, whatever the standards is recommended by these charters and institutions, international organization doctrines, you have to mark it up to that. So these are the three pillars which decide outstanding universal values for you. Let's quickly look at what are the 10 criterias. I have also briefly mentioned the examples here. The first criteria is masterpiece. Now, to represent a masterpiece of human creative genius, Taj Mahal is one of the example. Buddhist monuments at Sanchi, they're all masterpiece of human creativity. So that is the first criteria. The second criteria is to exhibit an important interchange of human values over a span of time or with cultural area of the world, on developments in architecture or technology or monumental arts, town planning or landscape designing. All of this fall under criteria 2. Example is the churches of convents of Goa and the monuments. So again, this is World Heritage site from India. And the criteria 3 This talks about testimony of cultures to bear a unique or at least exceptional testimony of any cultural tradition or civilization which is living or which is disappeared. In this case, it is not there. Sun Temple Konark is the example given here. And criteria 4, this to be an outstanding example of a type of building architecture or technical ensemble or even a landscape with illustrate, which illustrate significant stages in human histories. So the example is Taj Mahal, which is a landmark in Indian history. And then we have criteria 5. This is also an outstanding example of traditional human settlement, either land use or sea use, which is representative of culture of human has become vulnerable under the impact of irreversible change. Then such a monument has to be safeguarded or conserved. So they come under this criteria. Group of monuments of Mahabalipuram, Tamil Nadu. And then the first 6 criterias, they are all cultural heritage criterias. So from 7th onwards, you will, the focus is on natural heritage. Of course, authenticity and integrity do not really apply on natural, heritage. 7th heritage, natural phenomena, to contain in nature, like areas of exceptional natural beauty and aesthetic importance. They all fall under this criteria. Then the 8th criteria, which talks about ecology and biological process, where examples representing major stages of Earth's history. It could include a record of life, if they had to, and then development of landform or significant geomorphic features. If the land has all of this, then they fall under this category. And then natural habitats. So to be outstanding examples which represent significant or ongoing ecological process, which are very natural aesthetics, where you could have fresh water, coastal, marine ecosystems, community of plants and animals. All of that fall under this category. And the 10th, where we have Kanchenjunga National Park as enlisted. Here, they kind of expect the site to have more important and significant natural habitats for in situ conservation, meaning it should have biological diversity, which could include people settlement as well, containing threatened species. When human settlements have, are threatened, their culture is threatened, then that also is possible. But all of this again should have the outstanding universal value from, say, viewpoint of science or conservation. Then they fall under this criteria. So to enlist or to nominate any heritage site, you will have to satisfy either one of these criteria or more than one. The 6th criteria actually always have to be with one other criteria. It is not just that one, because it talks about more intangible heritage. So it has to have significant tangible heritage part also. So usually it is always along with one of the other criterias also. Now let's talk about the third pillar, that is protection and management. The principal objective of management is planning processes, the strategy largely for long-term protection of culture and natural heritage. So they have a long-term goal. It is not for just this year or the next, but lifelong. So they look at a larger or broader perspective, big picture for all these conservation sites. So particularly when they talk about management. So three important processes here are enlisted. Now there is heritage. You have perpetual monitoring system established. You have all your legal advisory boards in place for implementation as well as for planning. And when we say planning, it has to be together with the resource and institutional obligations. So both of which will help monitoring, planning, and implementation. Um, this is the three important process which should be established by the nation or the state which is trying to propose natural or cultural heritage under the World Heritage Site. So let's look at what are the benefits of World Heritage Sites then. There are lots. To start with, national and international recognition. Once the site is recognized beyond local and national territory, it becomes interest of the world or the globe. So it gets recognized and it becomes local and national pride. It gives us an identity as it's places us in a global or big picture. Our heritage is recognized by the world. So that is one. And economic benefits, of course, there are a lot of economic benefits. Sites become tourist magnets invariably. They attract tourists from all over the world, and opportunity to utilize the generated wealth thereby on the preservation and maintenance of the heritage. And also there is a huge socio-cultural, socio-economic stakeholders as well as the nation. So they get national and international funds for the heritage conservation very easily the moment they are on the they are declared as World Heritage Site. And site protection and preservation becomes more easier, and also this improves the condition of the local infrastructure invariably. Because we need to pull up the standards to accommodate the foreign tourists and such as, and conservation becomes a lot more easier with international aid, foreign funds, and all that. Then international monitoring, we get international monitoring system, which is very good because they have certain standards and they stick to it. It's like having a global watchdog to protect the most valuable site. And in addition to that, they support us in always with the requirements for conservation, in terms of repairs of financial, in any of those. So international monitoring helps for us indirectly maintaining the standard and the infrastructure around the heritage site. And then most important one is also that UNESCO actually assists in conducting many public awareness activities, campaigns. They educate locals, and community associated with the World Heritage Site, they benefit a lot from this. So today, let's look at one example where saving the world's heritage was a huge Herculean task. And they did it because this was World Heritage Site, and in a scale that is really, really shocking. So we look at a case study of Abu Simbel temples in Egypt, which were relocated. Between 1964 and 1968, the action of rescuing Ramses II and his wife's temple over here. This is made up of solid rock on the side of a hill. The temples of Abu Simbel, these were built more than 3,000 years ago, and this was in honor of Pharaoh Ramses II and his queen. I can't remember her name. Nefertari something. Okay, precisely his wife. And there they stood largely undisturbed until 1950s. So in mid 20th century, Egypt government, they were planning to construct the dam to control the unprecedented annual Nile floods, which were creating havoc, and they also needed to provide hydroelectric power to the vicinity. So they were thinking about constructing a dam. Now, but such a dam would definitely, well and truly place Abu Simbel underwater. So they had to do something about it. And relocating such a huge world heritage, which has been standing there for several, centuries, thousands of years, how do you do that? Recognizing the problem in 1959, Egypt and Sandini's government, they wrote to UNESCO seeking assistance in relocating this, and thus began a Herculean task of relocating this World Heritage site. Now the plan was to move the monuments completely away from the water or river, 65 meters higher and 200 meters back. That's the place they identified, and they wanted to put it up there on an artificial hill. Inside the hill, a concrete dome was planned, and you can see in the visual, which that would house the interior of the temple. Now, the delicate work began in 1964. They used tools ranging from hand saws to bulldozers, and the statues and temples were, carved into 20-ton blocks, and they were airlifted, which were put back together on the new site. So they had to mark each of the pieces and reassemble that. And the reassembling called for extreme precision with very little, tiny tolerance of, say, plus or minus 5 millimeters. You can imagine how much they would have managed to, relocate it as much as possible as it was in its original state. So the reconstructed temple was oriented to sun at certain times of the year as it was in the original plan. So this they managed. Now, how did they manage this actually? Uh, the illuminated interior, as per the original temple, was maintained with such precision. So Abu Simbel moved this movement or this moving activity or relocating activity was completed in 1968, and a total of about 22 monuments and complexes were all relocated by I believe 40 technical missions from 5 different continents. They came together. So how beyond of your territorial boundary you have gone to relocate this is an outstanding example for all of us that what World Heritage site or an organization like UNESCO and ICOMOS can really help us with. So the overall task was not completed until 1980, as in in its full state of visualization. But the point here is the international campaign that were trying to save this. They when they called, when they appealed, international appeal was made. I believe 113 countries responded with funds and expertise. So that's the beauty of international cooperation or World Heritage designation. This campaign actually is an unprecedented engineering achievement and a turning point that kind of made the preservation or cultural treasure as a responsibility that cut across borders. So it is a moving demonstration of the miracles that can be achieved by international cooperation. So that's the plus point of World Heritage Center. Now, let's quickly understand the process to be enlisted as WHS. So, the first thing is only countries that are signatory to World Heritage Convention can apply and submit nomination. That happened in 1972 convention. So, there were many countries who signed in actually the convention. India also signed in. So, India now has about 28 cultural and 7 natural and 1 mixed World Heritage site. So let's just understand the process. Now, every state or country that has signed the convention can submit property nomination for UNESCO to review. aspiring to get included in the World Heritage List. Now they prepare a nomination dossier. In our country, that is in India, this dossier is prepared by ASI. Under the Cultural Ministry, they formulate the nomination dossier. And we're allowed only to put up 2 nominations. Usually, the first preference is given to the cultural heritage, and the second one can either be natural or mixed heritage. Once the nomination is submitted to UNESCO, they take it to World Heritage Center, which is there at the headquarters is there at Paris. Now, Paris is the coordinator and focal office heading all matters related to World Heritage within the UNESCO team. So they also act as secretariat to the World Heritage Committee. What they do is they further forward these nominations, which is sent by UNESCO, to advisory boards. Like I said, ICOMOS and IUCN, they are the 2 important advisory boards under UNESCO, especially for World Heritage sites. What they do is they evaluate. The nominations, are gone through, evaluated. All the dossiers are evaluated. The organization actually comprises professionals who are, from various discipline, from various platform. Technical evaluations are all done with their help. This is a very lengthy process, which includes, the preliminary review of the dossier. From there to involving site visits, involving site party, local members of the site and experts, and they also check compliance with the charters, whether they have adhered to the charters and all of that, like, outstanding, the 3 pillars of OUV, outstanding universal value, is evaluated for the site, the nominated site, and then they proceed the recommendation. They say either the property can be inscribed or not. So that is the process. So it doesn't really stop at this. They also have the right to pull down the designation. So which means that in the recent times, actually, there is an Article 11, which is again, in accordance with the 1972 convention. There they had the power to delist or pull down any of the heritage if they don't follow the management process as guided by the World Heritage doctrines. So every site is evaluated, once in a while by the ICOMOS team, and the moment they feel that the heritage site is not taken care well enough, then they have the power to delist it from the World Heritage site, and that will have a huge implications. There are about 53 properties right now which are delisted, or listed as endangered or dangered. That means if they don't recover from whatever status they are in and match up to the recommendations of the World Heritage sites, then they get delisted from the World Heritage designation. Now we look at one of the important example in Indian case, Taj Mahal, which was, there were rumors that it may get delisted because of a lot of things, actually. In the year 2018, a special campaign was pulled. India Today had its cover page in its July issue, really a heart-stirring picture, which was inverted image of Taj reflected in the polluted Yamuna river, with save the Taj in bold letters. And the picture portrays the monumental neglect, which is at risk of irreversible damage from pollution and administrative mismanagement. And this was in such an urgency because everybody got scared that it will be delisted. Taj Mahal is the first cultural site from India that had gone under the list of World Heritage Site in 1983. So imagine this getting delisted. So that was the concern. And losing the Taj meant fighting a fierce battle for survival in the age of modernity. So you look at this visual, which shows the state of Yamuna, really sad. And the other picture shows losing the Taj. Picture of monumental neglect, risk of irreversible damage that it shows. So moving forward, let's quickly understand what were the issues. Largely the issues were from pollution, from the burning ghats. Like there are 8 ghats on the river banks within the radius of 10-12 kilometers. All of these are used for bathing, religious rituals like idol immersions, and also cremation. So apart from organic waste and plastic, even carcasses, they are a huge dirt causing trouble to the ghats, the river. They are regularly found floating on Yamuna River. So UP government had failed to remove the wood burning crematorium, which was placed very close to Taj. This is again, one of the reasons. And then carbon and dust turning the Taj dark. You see the stain on our heritage visual, the first visual, which clearly shows the half of Taj on the left, how it was, as a cultural heritage of the past, and what is it now today with that, color. So atmospheric carbon is actually wreaking havoc on Taj, discoloring the marble. And there were speculations also about acid rain, but post certain interventions and clarifications, they seemed not to be the concern, but the concern was more with respect to the atmospheric carbon, the air pollution, which was surrounding the Taj Mahal. And then the third was erosion, scarring the Taj, where flaking plasters and also stained marbles, missing stones and inlay work, minarets and domes, all of this kind of crumbling into, storm. All these are indicators of prolonged structural erosion, possible from, rusting of concealed iron lungs and dowels that they used to join the stones together back then. It could be that. So it essentially it was not really maintained, and that kind of led to an erosion which was of concern. Then maddening rush of tourists. This is something which is common to all of the World Heritage sites. Taj also reeled under footfalls. The fragile areas like the main mausoleum and then the platform at the center of the Charbagh, all were stressed. Mass human presence kind of creates unhealthy, humid, sweat, oil, dirt when we contact the surface of the walls, and those are all absorbed by the marble. And at a longer run, the stains remain. Longer it remains, harder it is to remove, and that was the problem there. And the most difficult part is, as the volume of visitors increase, they hinder perpetually to all the activities of conservation. While carrying out work, while the conservators carrying out work, these visitors and with their loud noise and things, they kind of disturb, and they don't allow the conservation activity to go on in peace. That is also something which is of concern in almost all the heritage sites, I must say. And then the last point and the most important point is Taj dies if Yamuna dies. So there are idle plants, mining, domestic and industrial waste, deforestation, groundwater exhaustion, which is kind of floodplains are all encroached, and they make Yamuna ecologically destroyed, literally dead. The Taj's foundation, I believe, are buried deep inside the riverbed. And the concern now is, what if Mughal tomb Taj cave in as Yamuna dies? Due to the alarming receding water level, one can only wonder and imagine the destruction that it may cause, and really worry about Taj Mahal caving in. So these were some of the issues which Taj Mahal faced. let's just go back to the flashback. Some of these photos are very, very memorable and interesting. The first photo is was taken in 1942. A protective wartime scaffolding around the Taj during World War II. And then view of Taj Mahal from Yamuna River. This was taken in 1891, even older times. And there's another Agra, the fort and the Taj put together, and then the streets of Agra in 1858 and 62. So the question is, developmental priorities are destroying India's most iconic monument. What can we do to rescue our national treasure? This is something, of course, they have answered, they've tried to do a lot of things to revive Taj, but the concern today is, this is a state of almost all of the World Heritage sites. So how do we, do anything to resolve this issue? Now, that is the end of today's session. We conclude with the assignment. Assignment would be discuss with an example that you have seen or say read about whether designation of a heritage property as World Heritage Site has been good or bad. All you have to do is either, if you're staying close to any of the heritage site, then the work is easy. If not, you would have read about these World Heritage Sites, right, designation, and there'll be a lot of articles and discussion forums we have where from where you can get information and understand. And then you have to put up your argument whether World Heritage designation of World Heritage Site is good or bad to any of the heritage site that you have identified. So that is the end of the session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. This assignment is very tough as per big experience of last this 13-15 years, because once you get the designation, what will happen? You can ask the site owners or the ASI or the bodies which works for it. So thanks a lot. If there are any questions, then please, most welcome. अगर किसी को कुछ सवाल है तो कृपया जरूर पूछिए. शायद आज के इसमें हाँ, यस प्लीज. किसी को कुछ सवाल है? हाँ, यस मैडम प्लीज. हाँ, वृशाली मैडम, यस प्लीज. आपने हाथ ऊपर किया है, पूछिए आप. हाँ, यस, ओके.
हाँ, मैम, you told the 10 criterias, right?
Right.
Third one was testimony of culture. Can you explain it again?
See, that criteria actually talks about any heritage which has traditions or cultural values in terms of living and buildings from historical times, and it is still connected and you have enough evidence on the site to establish that. So there is a connection with the culture and the building or the surroundings of the present. So that is a testimony of some traditions, right? Some living people in the past. So that is the criteria number 3. They seem to be overlapping with one another, but I think you have to really read the criterias and take some time to understand and maybe even compare it with cases or examples, and then you get the clarity. I suggest you, if you go to World Heritage, a site, and then look for criterias with examples, then I think your understanding will be much better.
Yeah.
I could not do that actually. I wanted to do each criteria and an example and elaborate on that, but I have only 1 hour, so I really can't do that. And that's available on net actually. You can really
go through. I'll go through.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So with this session, just I request to all the participants, if there are such any sites around you, then please take the photographs of it and please send it on WhatsApp number with the location name, village name, taluka, district, place, and state, so that we can listed that such sites and we can do something for that. अगर बहुत बार ऐसा होता है हमारे आजू बाजू में कई सारे ऐसे साइट्स होते हैं, अभी हमने उसके लिए ग्रुप भी बनाया है, मगर हम ये देखते हैं ग्रुप बहुत सारे बनते हैं, मगर जो वर्क होना चाहिए एक्चुअली उसके लिए कुछ लोग होते हैं जो डेडिकेटेडली वर्क करते हैं। थोड़ा सा पेन होता है क्योंकि हमारे पास हमारे कंप्यूटर में लैपटॉप में बहुत डाटा होता है, हम जहां पर भी गए, बट मैं पहले जब जहां भी जाता था द बेस्ट फोटोग्राफ्स हम लेते थे, क्या बेस्ट है उसका फोटो लेते थे, मगर अभी ये समझ में आ रहा है कि बेस्ट के साथ साथ जो वहां पर गलत हुआ है या जहां मेंटेनेंस प्रॉपरली नहीं है उसके भी फोटोग्राफ्स लेने चाहिए। क्योंकि अगर हम किसी एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन में हैं या अगर हम किसी को सूचना देना चाहते हैं, कुछ इंफॉर्मेशन देना चाहते हैं, हाउ टू मेंटेन दिस आवर हेरिटेज साइट्स, तो उसके बारे में हमें जरूर ये करना चाहिए। एक कोर्स जो हमने लिया था यूनेस्को वर्ल्ड हेरिटेज साइट्स इन इंडिया, 10 डेज कोर्स हमने उस समय ऑर्गेनाइज किया था, उस समय मुझे ये बहुत ज्यादा महसूस हुआ और पूरे देश भर से बहुत सारे ऐसे स्कॉलर्स जो उस साइट्स पर है उन्होंने बहुत हेल्प किया, इसलिए हम ये दिखा पाए क्योंकि हमने पर्टिकुलरली हर सेशन में उस पॉइंट पर ध्यान दिया था कि कहाँ पर क्या प्रॉब्लम्स है और हम उसे किस तरह से टैकल करना है उसके बारे में। So I request here, sincerely request to all of you that अगर आपके आजू बाजू में, though it is not a World Heritage Site or National Protected Monument or State Protected, but if they are in bad condition, please take the photographs and please give the information so that we can do something. हम सब मिलकर ही कुछ अच्छा बना सकते हैं, इस बात को हम याद रखें। और आप अपने लेवल पर अगर आपने डिस्ट्रिक्ट के लिए अगर ऐसा ग्रुप बनाते हैं और उस ग्रुप में भी अगर इस तरह से कुछ ये करते हैं तो बहुत अच्छी बात है, क्योंकि हम एंजॉय तो करते हैं बट वी आर द प्रोटेक्टिंग वॉरियर्स, हम लोग ही मिलकर के इस विरासत को बचा सकते हैं। अदरवाइज सिर्फ एएसआई को, सिर्फ स्टेट ऑफिसर्स को या किसी गवर्नमेंट को दोष दे करके, ब्लेम करके कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ने वाला। हम मिलकर ही ये अवेयरनेस क्रिएट करना होगा लोकल में, और उसके बारे में हम साथ साथ अवेयरनेस के साथ साथ हम जो है गवर्नमेंट को भी इसका बहुत सीरियसली हमें ये दिखाना होगा कि ये जो हो रहा है, आप इतना पैसा खर्च करें। जस्ट आई वांट टू गिव वन एग्जांपल, NMMA, नेशनल मिशन ऑन मॉन्यूमेंट्स एंड एंटिक्विटीज, व्हिच वाज स्टार्टेड इन 2005 एंड अप टू 2020 in Maharashtra state only 32 monuments enlisted, सिर्फ 32 साइट का ये किया गया। तो हमने ये सवाल पूछा कि 32 साइट तो हम अगर एक काम करने के लिए निकले तो 1 महीने में हम कंप्लीट कर देंगे, 15 साल लगे उसको ये करने के लिए, और जो भी ये हुआ वो भी गलत तरीके से लिस्टिंग हुआ है, तो ये भी हमने प्रूव किया उस समय। मैं सिर्फ ये कहना चाहता हूँ, आई डोंट वांट टू ब्लेम एनीवन, बट जस्ट अगर हम सब मिलके अगर प्रयास करें तो हो सकता है हम अपनी विरासत को बचा सके। सो इसी रिक्वेस्ट के साथ मैं यहाँ पर अपनी बात को रोकता हूँ। कृष्णमूर्ति रामलिंगम जी, विच ग्रुप आर वी सपोज्ड टू सेंड? आप जिस ग्रुप में ऑलरेडी है उसमें अगर भेजेंगे तो भी चलेगा, आप मेरे पर्सनल व्हाट्सएप नंबर पर भेजेंगे तो भी चलेगा, अदरवाइज आई विल ऐड योर नंबर इन दैट हेरिटेज प्रोटेक्टिंग, इसमें तो उसमें भी कर सकते हैं। सो नो प्रॉब्लम, आप किसी भी व्हाट्सएप नंबर पे भेजें या मैं आपको उस ग्रुप में ऐड कर दूंगा। सो थैंक यू। अगर किसी का कुछ सवाल है तो पूछिए, यहाँ पर हैंड रेज किया है। यस, हाँ यस विक्रम जी।
सर, ये आपने एक दिन पहले लिखा था कि एक असाइनमेंट इसी पर्टिकुलर सिलसिले में हम भेजें फोटोग्राफ्स, वही क्वेश्चन है, भेजें कहाँ? क्योंकि कुछ ग्रुप्स ऐसे हैं जिसमें सिर्फ आप ही भेज सकते हैं, हम चाह के भी कुछ नहीं लिख सकते उसमें।
मैंने ग्रुप में इसके लिए अपना ईमेल आईडी लिखा था, dir.museum@dacri.in, dacri.in, ये मैंने ईमेल आईडी लिखा था, आप उस पर भेज सकते हैं या आप मेरे व्हाट्सएप नंबर पर भेज सकते हैं।
ठीक है, थैंक यू सर, थैंक यू।
मोस्ट वेलकम जी। और किसी को कुछ सवाल है तो पूछिए, यहाँ पर एक हाथ ऊपर है। यस प्लीज। शायद ये पहले वृषाली मैम ने किया था, उनका हो गया है। सो अगर किसी को कुछ सवाल नहीं है तो फिर अभी हम यहाँ पर जो है आज का सेशन अभी हम यहाँ स्टॉप करते हैं। सो मैडम Please give me
Yeah.
permission.
Before we leave, I just want to again, extend the thoughts of Sir. The whole idea of this course was, or the intention of this course was the same. Like, there are a lot of people who are in conservation field. I'm an architect, but I'm not a conservation architect. But it is only the interest which has taken me far enough to understand the heritage wealth that we have, and then the need to do something about it. So each one of us can have our own ways to deal with it. And I think if we even put our hands together with what Bobde sir ji kar rahe hai, so that is also enough, And I urge all of you to try this assignments that I'm trying to give you. ये भी आज का भी इतना मुश्किल नहीं है. It is just your point of perspective, that's all. If you feel that the World Heritage Site is positive because of economic growth, or negative because it puts stress on the infrastructure, existing infrastructure, then that's your point. That's about it. A sentence or two, your opinion. वही मैं पूछ रही हूँ, कुछ ज़्यादा नहीं. Every assignment, if you try to do, the whole intention is to understand the process. When you understand the process, it's much more easier to do anything to save our heritage. That's the only concern and request that I have. Otherwise, and also tomorrow's session, I have a slight change. I was thinking, because more of you are all keen on, trying to understand the solutions for conserving or methods. You're all more interested to know that. Then I don't want to test your patience. Let's have that tomorrow, and perhaps heritage democracy after that. So tomorrow's class will be more on trying to understand the method of conservation. So with that change, I think I would like to take leave of today's session.
Just a minute. Vikramji, some want to ask something. Yeah, Vikramji,
Sure.
please.
Madam, can you share some light on ICOMOS? This is an organization I have heard somewhere that is ICOMOS, International Council of Monuments and all.
Yes,
Further,
yes.
how can a particular individual like me, who is not part and parcel of neither further archaeology, neither at the same time
Sure.
from architecture, can I be part and parcel of that, and how I can help further to protect a particular area at a particular monument if it is there in us around?
Okay. Sir, ICOMOS has charters in each of the nations. We have ICOMOS India, where we have this organization, and a lot of people are there. You can become member of ICOMOS. So you go to the site of ICOMOS India, and then there are certain procedures to be followed, and you don't have to be really learned under conservation as such. Of course, that becomes a plus point for you to become a member. But if you have worked in conservation at any point of your life, then I think that supporting documents should enable you to get enrolled into ICOMOS India. And once you get in there, then you're exposed to the whole world. The ICOMOS other nations, they keep conducting so many conferences and workshops. Immense knowledge sharing activities happen, and then you can contribute in many different ways. If you really want to do that, engage, you can definitely do that. So perhaps you should try becoming member of ICOMOS. And prior to that, if you can become a member of INTAC, I think that will help, because you can involve yourself in certain hands-on activity. Thereby, that kind of builds up your profile, which will help you to become a member of ICOMOS easily. Otherwise, they have certain criteria who becomes the member.
You said INTAC. What does that INTAC mean, ma'am?
It is again, NGO of India. We did discuss, I think, in the second session. It's also a non-government. Second day, non-government organization. They also have charters in each region. So which region you belong, they will have INTAC charters. All you have to do is just Google it for your region, and you will find the website. And that website will clearly help you to get enrolled into INTAC. They are all looking for people who have time and interest to work with them. So you can engage yourself in INTAC activities after becoming the member of INTAC. And I think that should help you, because if you have no exposure of conservation at all in any of your lifetime things, then it may become a little difficult to get into ICOMOS at one go. So maybe you should do this. You go take the first step towards INTAC, and then from there you can take the leap to ICOMOS India. That
Thanks a
will
lot, ma'am. Thank you.
explicitly.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. Vaishali ma'am or Divya ji, you want to ask something?
Namaste, Mahodaya. Yes, I want to
Namaste.
know, apart from the NGOs that we spoke of in the current session, all these organizations, how are they funded? I mean, are they supported or directly government organizations, or independent of the government? Because I want to understand if they are influenced by what government is there in the particular country, because that also spills upon what heritage, maybe the decisions they take on what monument to be conserved or restored and things like that. So are these independent organizations totally, or are they also government organizations, ma'am?
When we say non-government organization, the name itself says that they don't come under government, governance of government. They're independent. So when the independent organization is formed, the funding is very little tricky. I mean, they're not funded by government, so they'll have to find their funds on their own. So they will have some funding mechanism where a lot of people who are interested for the cause, they will join hands together and they will start an organization. Initially, they capitalize themselves. They churn up the seed money themselves. Only after certain duration that they will be able to get funding, external funding, from other funding organizations. For some of their projects, even government also indirectly funds. And they get non-governmental, international funds also to support them if the work is up to the standard. So what these non-government organizations do also is that they take care of those heritages, those properties which are neglected by the government. Or not neglected, I would say, which are not enlisted or taken by the government, either the state or the central, but they have the heritage value. Then these non-government organizations, they come and into picture, and they start there. Actually, you have to read INTAC, how they kind of formed. I think it was formed in early 1970s, and how they have gradually grown. It's not like one day story that they formed today and tomorrow they're big. They have traveled a long way, and they have fought many battles to stand up to where they are today. Like in the second day, if you just go back to the last part of it and see, they have their objectives set, and they have their guidelines and procedures. So they also have certain level of administrative system in place. Actually, today INTAC is in a better position than it was a couple of years ago. They also have some kind of monetary salary system that exists. Otherwise, it was non-government, and many of them work for free. Those who started earlier in those days, they were all working for free because they had the passion, they had the intention of saving. And good for us.
Not only free, but for the membership they paid 5,000 rupees, and they give their services also to for this work. And before the government authorized to give for this work, they have such type of experience in this work, then only they authorize for it. Otherwise, it's not possible for the funding also or for to work also. So दोनों का परमिशन नहीं मिलता है अगर वो ऑथराइज नहीं है, अगर वो कैपेबल नहीं है तो। यस ओके, मेरे ख्याल से अभी यहाँ पर जो है समय बहुत ज्यादा हो चुका है। हाँ वृषाली जी, आप कुछ पूछना है?
Yeah, sir. Ma'am, we were talking about delisting the monument or heritage site. So it is evaluated, you said. So how frequently this evaluation happens for a site?
That is not set as a particular number of years as such. It depends on each World Heritage Site. So it is slightly subjective. and each site gets its monitoring in slightly different way because they're all coordinated by the state government through ASI to the international organization. So each state has certain way of functioning and certain way of system that they would have created. So this happens, like if you actually again go back to World Heritage Site and see how many the monitoring system, every time they monitor and they produce a dossier document to actually talk about what is the status and what is the condition. So they are different
so
for different
as per today's nomination there are 100 chances, उन्होंने 100 इसका ये दिया है अभी आज की तारीख में वर्ल्ड हेरिटेज साइट। अगर 100 अटेम्प्ट ऐसे हो जाते हैं कि जो गलत है और गवर्नमेंट उसको केयर नहीं कर रही है, देन इट विल बी डिलिस्टेड 100 टाइम्स, ऐसा उनका अभी का दिया हुआ क्राइटेरिया ये है। बट इफ समथिंग सीरियस तो उनके रिपोर्ट में वो कहां पर क्या हो रहा है, क्या गलत हो रहा है, वो भी उस केस में दर्ज किया होता है। आप भारत के हर साइट के बारे में भी ऐसा वहां पर पढ़ सकते हैं। So
thank you so much.
Yeah, yes. Now there is too much time. Very sorry. मुझे क्षमा कीजिए और with your kind permission, now we'll stop here. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Namaskar to all.
Thank you, ma'am.